Good evening, everybody. This is Kevin Dugas with Do I Need a Bigger Mouthpiece? And this is a special solo and late night episode of the podcast. Alex and I have both been inundated with the middle of the semester and everything that it brings for different reasons. Since I'm not in school, I'm not dealing with quite the same things that I've dealt with in the past, although I am doing a little bit of teaching. But we've decided to split up duties for the last couple of episodes, and he presented a wonderful episode on private teaching, starting your own studio. And I am presenting an episode this evening on fall break and reassessing where we find ourselves towards the middle of the semester and how we can recalibrate and make sure that we finish the semester with the same enthusiasm and the same go get 'em attitude as we might have started it, or hopefully how we started the episode. I'm excited to do this at this point in the day after my baby has been put down for the night. My wife has gone to sleep, and so it's nice and it's still here a little bit. As I was growing up, as a very quick aside, when I was much younger and I would be listening to the radio in the car, perhaps later at night, and I would hear DJs doing the late night hour. I always thought that was a really cool job. So this is as close as I'm probably going to get, and I'm really excited to do that. But yes, we are talking about fall break. And back to one of my original points here. When we start an academic semester, so often we have to call it an illusion of grandeur is not correct. We have enthusiasm. We're motivated. We have specific ideas perhaps that are really getting us excited about the potential for what that semester is about to bring. I sort of think about what it's like when you have a recital that's anywhere between 3 and 5 months away. The sky is the limit for what you are going to be able to accomplish in those 3 to 5 months. And then as you get closer to the end of that term and the end of that length of time, the reality sets in of what you've actually been able to get done. And that doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's just sort of reframes it to where it's no longer a pie in the sky thing. It's a very real thing that you're dealing with. And the academic semester is much the same. So as we are here towards the end of fall break for a couple of folks and towards maybe fall break happening next weekend for others, I thought this would be a great episode to talk about and just sort of relate some of my experience as it pertains to the middle of the semester, because I certainly had my ups and downs academically, and as I'm sure we all have. And I just wanted to, take advantage of where we are and talk about those things. So I'm really just going to be giving you about three or so ideas to help you along your journey as you get to this midway point and move forward towards the end of the semester. This isn't meant to be a particularly long episode, so I hope that if you have a relatively short commute this week, or if you're doing a couple of mundane things around your living quarters, that perhaps you will be able to just like digest this entire episode very quickly. And I am not here to reset the wheel or reset the wheel. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel for you. Nothing that I'm saying is particularly transcendent or revolutionary, but rather I'm just kind of here as your friendly reminder, as we all need throughout different parts of our lives. We need that friendly reminder of, hey, you know what you should be doing, but I just want to let you know, hey, make sure that you're holding yourself accountable. I'm here to hold you accountable and to help you realize your potential for the semester. Okay, so without any further ado, let's jump in to our three things that can help us galvanize ourselves here in the middle of the semester, make the most of what we have left, and finish the upcoming semester strong. So the first thing that I have outlined here is planning out our academic hurdles and creating a strategy to methodically check them off. Okay, so as a teacher, when I was teaching college for a time, and as I've taught secondary lessons for, well over a decade now, one of the most frustrating things for me is when a student comes to me and says, I just haven't had time to practice. I have all of these things coming up. I have deadlines, I have projects, I have midterms, I have finals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that's really valid, right? I mean, those things do, in fact, get in the way of what it is we have to do. But how much of those situations are created by exceptionally poor planning or procrastination on our part with our academic deadlines? Okay. And this is something that I fell prey to, particularly when I was an undergrad, a little bit when I was in my master's degree, where it's just like as the semester wears on, you practice less and less and less because you don't have time to practice. You are literally writing papers, you're studying for exams. You might have ear training, and that's taking a particular amount of time. You might have piano finals or piano midterms, various tests within piano that you have to practice for. I had a particularly rough night in my undergrad where I think I stayed up all night practicing for a piano final. That wasn't the best use of my time in a short amount of time for obvious reasons. Practicing trombone, cramming practice for trombone is a bad idea. Cramming practice for a secondary instrument is arguably an even worse idea. And so the other thing that sort of leaving these deadlines towards the end is going to do is it's going to weigh on you mentally. So let's say that you have 4 weeks to finish this big pedagogy project, perhaps, because that was something that I had to do in undergrad. You have 4 weeks to complete this pedagogy project. Even if you are trying to remain as blissfully ignorant to that deadline as possible, you're aware of it. Even if you're putting it off, you're aware that that deadline is coming up. And so your time spent, whether that be hanging out with friends, goofing off, or time spent practicing, all of that is a slightly cheapened experience, in my opinion, because you are aware of the things that are going to be coming upon you in this horizon of time where you're going to really struggle with a tight deadline because of something you're putting off because of stress. And this is, as I said, it's only going to cheapen your practice if you're looking at this through the lens of how the quality of your practice is, and it's going to render you a little bit less productive. So my advice, what served me well at the various times in my academic career when I made a point of doing this, is lay everything out. Get a journal. If I am recording this and I'll use this for some clips, I have a written journal in front of me that I do my best to write my daily obligations, what it is that I'm trying to do. But this is the same journal or a type of journal like this that I used throughout my DMA at BU, where when I had the most academically challenging moments ahead of me, I was detailing everything out that I had to do, and I was creating a timeline for which I was going to get all of these things done. Okay. And understand that that is not necessarily going to mean that that timeline is going to get executed perfectly, but just having a game plan for something and not trying to keep everything all up in your head is paramount to your success. It's paramount towards your mental health also as you go about these things. So let's say, for instance, that you're an undergrad right now. You're an undergrad music education major, right? It's marching band season. So if you're at a big school, okay, so you're in marching band, that's taking up some of your time. Let's say, for instance, that you just started methods courses. So you're going to have to be recording secondary instrument videos, maybe peer teach videos. And then, of course, you're still in music theory and you're probably in some liberal arts classes, right? It's hellish, okay? I don't pretend to tell you that it's easy, but you're at a point in the semester now that you're probably well aware of the things that you need to go get done. Okay, you're well aware of the most intricate and time-consuming aspects of your academic obligations for the rest of the semester. And so if you take this opportunity now, we're in this beautiful time of late October. If you plan out your life meticulously, take an entire day, okay? And this is going to be a bit of a theme of this point. I would rather you forego the practice today, okay, and plan everything out than forego the practice at the end of the semester when you need it most to stay afloat because you're so busy doing everything else. Take the time, plan out when you're going to be doing all of your peer teachings. Plan out When are you going to be doing your theory homework? Schedule it like a practice session for 40 minutes a day, whatever it is that it takes. Plan out your stupid geography class that you have to take. I took a really cumbersome geography class my second semester of college, I remember, and it ate me up at various times because I didn't study ever because I had horrible time management. So, your liberal arts classes, if you're having to take some of those, plan that time out. Pretend it's a practice session. And the most arduous projects that you have, this is this idea that I have about front loading it. It would be better if you took part of, even if it's not your fall break, even if it's the week afterwards, it would be better if you took time off of the horn early to absolutely take giant chunks out of these really difficult projects. I mentioned trauma and pedagogy earlier. When I was in my undergrad, I had this massive trauma and pedagogy and trauma and literature course that I took, which was like basically a small private study almost with my teacher, Dr. McCain at Texas State. And I thought that I was kind of splitting things up reasonably, and I was not. I was not. I very much waited so much to the end of those deadlines to do these massive projects. I'm talking I had to write over 100 pages when it came to trauma and pedagogy because I was a performance major, and the whole point of that was that I make sure that I was pedagogically sound in my own teaching and approach as a performance major, and this was really important work. And I shoved a lot of it off to the end. And not only did that cause significant stress for me, but it also, I didn't get as much out of that project at the time as I should have. And it took, how much more could I have gotten or could I have gleaned from the knowledge that I was supposed to be getting from that project if I had just been more serious and more meticulous about spreading everything out from the beginning? Okay. So if you find yourself, sorry, I'm looking at my last point here. Returning to school is where I finally stopped procrastinating. Oh, yes. So, really, where I kind of got all of this together finally was when I was doing my DMA. And, I was 30 when I started my DMA, and I told myself, darn it, I have had a nice job for the last 4 years. I have been acting as an adult and telling people how they should go about things, and I'm going to make sure that I walk the walk. And I wasn't perfect. We never will be perfect, but I really took the time to make sure that I knocked out theory assignments in a timely manner because I still had to do plenty of those. I had this big lecture presentation. I took an entire class for it. I feverishly knocked out all of the writing for that. I wanted to be so far ahead in that class to where when it came time to me having a week left of my deadline, I was absolutely calm and collected. And I can say that I was. So it took me some time, obviously. A lot of you that are listening to us, you're not in your 30s, okay? You feel like you have your whole life ahead of you to make these mistakes. And please listen to me, save yourself a little bit of trouble, and just write things down. Write down the scariest things you have. Okay. One that's going to make them less scary. And then write out a plan. Okay. So that is my number one thing for attacking the rest of this semester and making sure that you stay on top is having a plan for your most difficult tasks and then following that plan. All right. You might not follow it to the T. Some things might come off the rails a little bit, but at least you have something that you're aiming towards. Okay. Now, number two on this list of ways to make sure that the rest of your semester is a success is embracing simplicity. So, amidst the chaos of all of the hard playing that you're doing in your large ensembles and your chamber ensembles, as you're getting ready for your juries, as you're getting ready for your recitals, as perhaps you're taking on some work outside of school, you probably got a lot of notes to play. You got a lot of notes to make sure that you have the chops for. You have all of these things that you have to worry about, right? As I'm saying this, you have the images in your head of the hardest licks that you have to play for the rest of the semester, the things that are giving you the most anxiety. I don't even, in a second, you can recall everything that you have to do between now and December that's giving you the just anxiety, right? You can see it. So, amidst all of that, take time to work on the easy parts of your playing and make the foundation of your playing even more solid. All right. Now, this is something that we talked a little bit about in the Arvin's episode, and this is probably a recurring theme for a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is focusing upon your fundamental playing and prioritizing the foundations of your playing and how important that is to practice slow, to practice methodically, to practice, you know, etudes, to practice scales, long tones, etc. And I know that we say that a lot, but part of the things that you have to do as a teacher, and if you're not already teaching, but you aspire to at all, you're going to see this. You do have to repeat yourself to get your point across. Okay. I've learned that from some great teachers, and I've experienced it myself that things that you feel like you should only have to say once, you have to say many times. So if you take nothing else from our podcast, let it be you need to practice slow, you need to practice your fundamentals. But my greater point here is you are not as proficient at your 3-note lip slur or at your soft mid-register long tone playing as you think you are. Okay, this is something that I remind myself of daily in my own practice because I do my absolute best to prioritize starting from the bottom every single day that I practice, which is most days, even amidst the chaos of fresh fatherhood for me. Most of the days where I'm practicing, which is most days, I start super easy. It's all about how easily can I do this most simple, mundane things that I would have taken for absolute granted when I was 18, when I was 24. The things that I thought would just be second nature entirely, right? They stay second nature because I stay on top of them. Okay. When I start to let go of the idea that I need to practice playing softly or that I need to practice centering simple articulation in easier registers, when I start to take those things for granted over a long period of time and I start to emphasize instead all of the licks that we mentioned that give me anxiety, I start to get into trouble. The foundation of my playing starts to fall apart just a little bit because I'm now constantly working on the top of everything. Like imagine I have this structure. I'm now just working up here at the top, and here at the bottom, things are starting to sort of buckle a little bit, right? And so that is going to create problems, right, from the bottom of what I'm capable of doing. And that's not good for me. And I've been thinking about this a lot actually. Think back to, for some of you that are in undergrad, but really anybody that's played a recital or anybody that's played anything nearly important at any point ever. What were some of the most frustrating parts of it? Was the most frustrating part of your performance that you missed the highest note that had been giving you trouble the entire time? I mean, it's frustrating, but wasn't it more frustrating that you biffed a really easy slurred passage in the middle register at mezzo piano and it like didn't speak? Wasn't that a little bit more frustrating because you, in your practice of that piece, perhaps hadn't really run into that issue? But in the moment when it mattered most, that very foundational thing was lacking from your playing. And because of that, you were you were left without it when you actually needed to present it. And that's frustrating. And so that's why it's important for us to go back in the busiest parts of our semester and make sure that we are playing beautifully in all of the things that we would consider to be incredibly easy. Take care of your, I keep going back to soft playing, but I feel so strongly about it today in particular because it was coming up in my playing and I made a point to have some eye-opening moments just playing some soft long tones and just wanting to get that particular sound, that I was chasing the entire time. And it was frustrating. This idea is not something that we might discourage, which is like, oh, you're just practicing the things you're good at, or you're just practicing the things that you know you can do and you're avoiding the things you can't. This is not that, because this is taking the hardest look at the things that you should absolutely be able to do, but you are not able to do 100 out of 100 times. Okay. And that is why we start at the beginning every day. That is why we start with, for me, I start with flow studies. I start with simple patterns from a scalar perspective. I really love from the Patterns and Snippets book by Brad Edwards. And this isn't this isn't the last mention that I'll give of him in this episode. But in his Patterns and Snippets book, there's two patterns in particular that are not difficult, diatonic major scale like patterns that I use in my warm up right now, at least, and throughout different periods of time in my playing over the past 5 to 7 years. I use them every day. Okay. I use them specifically. I have an A and a B day, and I follow, I think it's the whole tone scale, which we have two of. And I go up and down one whole tone scale one day, and I go up and down another whole tone scale the next day. So that diatonically, I'm hitting all 12 every other day. And so, but I start from this point of ease. And my whole goal is to just get as effortless of a response, as, pure of a sound and as great of intonation as I possibly can, not at a fast tempo. And when I start, not even over a particularly wide range. Okay. It's all about doing the simplest things with beauty. And if you find yourself sort of cram practicing, this is one of the big things that as professors and as teachers we want students to avoid, is as they get closer to that deadline, just like the 5 minute warm up, and then all of a sudden I'm like pounding the hardest stuff that I got to play for the rest of the semester. Okay, that is a really flipped upside down playing food pyramid esque idea that we want to avoid. Okay, and so embrace that simplicity. Some of the books that I really like to go to for this, I love the Chimera books, or the Chimera. I think it's Chimera, but it's the phrasing studies. So for those of you that don't know about the Chimera book, spelled Cimera, that book is out of print. It floats around a little bit. You can probably find a PDF of it somewhere. I don't think that it's for sale anymore, to my understanding. Don't quote me on that. But that book is essentially like the Bordoni Melodious Etudes book, except it's simpler. Excuse me. It is a simpler book, shorter etudes. The range is very, very manageable. And for bass trombone players, you can just take that down an octave. You can take it tenor clef down 2 octaves, because you should be working on your tenor clef, obviously. But it's all about simplicity. I remember when I was in my master's degree and I was going through this period of time that we're sort of alluding to today, where I was pretty tired. It was the middle of the semester. I was in a lesson with Dr. Jonathan Whitaker, and I was sounding pretty awful because I was fried, right? I had been practicing too much, probably hadn't been taking care of myself, knowing me at that point. And he said, why don't you just play some chimeras? He's like, I had my lessons on a Friday or close to it, if I remember correctly. And he said, this upcoming weekend, why don't play on Saturday, play on Sunday, and just pull the horn out and play chimeras and just focus on sounding great. The easy stuff sounding great. And up to that point, I had not really considered that as a possibility. And it's not because I probably hadn't been told that. I'm sure other wise voices had told me that at some point. But it was just like, you understand, as a student, sometimes it just takes hearing it in a different way, in a particular way. And in this way, I was like, oh wow, yeah, I should do that. And it's stayed with me ever since. And so that's a really great book. Take the Kaprash book, play things very slowly near the front end of the book, and focus on your articulation being, whatever it is you want it to be. If you want to practice a little bit more marcato, that's fine. But maybe I would imagine you want to practice, not super loud, pretty slow, very light, and very accurate with a great sound. And then there's my second allusion to the Brad Edwards pedagogical universe, if you will. The Lipsler Melodies book is a great book for this idea, where there's so many etudes throughout the book, but particularly in the beginning of the book, that are simple in presentation, and they're just simple melodies made up of basic lip slurs. He does a nice job making something that is, out of very basic components. You can rise to the challenge of making it musically compelling, and he's done a nice job writing all of those. So any of these method books, if you spent time making that really, really beautiful, it would show up in the hard moments. Okay. I promise you that. I absolutely promise you that. I've been needing to cough there for a little bit. So today, for me, that was just to give you a small glimpse in. I've been re-emphasizing scalar practice, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, but I've kind of leaned into the idea that consistency, range, technique, all of that can be really combined into meticulous and intelligent scale practice. And today I set out to do all these wonderful things in C major, or in C, really. It was C major and C minor. And I ended up spending a lot of time just glissing a 2-octave scale, something that I know I can do, but I felt an ease in doing that. And when I went in to add the legato playing, it wasn't as easy. I could do it, and younger me would have probably checked the box and just kept going. But I knew that it wasn't the sound, it wasn't the intonation, and it wasn't the consistency when I added the legato tone. And so I spent the better part of that practice session on the C major and the C harmonic minor scale, just trying to make it sound easy, just trying to make it sound beautiful, not playing it fast, not double tonguing it, just, stuff that I could get onto myself and say, well, Kevin, you should be able to do this. This should be effortless. All of these things. And that's all well and fine. But if it isn't, I need to take a step back and I need to be humble in my approach to understand that this is just something that's difficult for, even the little things can be difficult if we don't take the proper time to give them their respect and the time owed to really honing that skill. So that's my second point, is to just embrace your simplicity. If you have 3 hours to practice in a day, do me a favor, make 2 of those hours beautiful, foundational, easy sounding practice. All right. And I think that by the end of the semester, you are going to feel a lot better for this. And actually, this episode was it's called Fall Break, and I was advertising 3 things. But I thought of this 4th thing just now before I even get to my 3rd point. So you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. But it's this point that I have thought of a couple times throughout the day, and I'm not going to take a long time explaining it before I get to my final point, but I do want to insert it because it kind of goes well here. And it complements the first one, talking about planning things out. Something I want you to do as a big part of your as your, push towards this final part of the semester, is I want you to physically write down what you want out of this semester. Okay, so some of you are going to be giving recitals, some of you are going to be giving juries, some of you are going to be, taking barrier exams if you're in your 4th semester perhaps. And you have some big things on the horizon for this semester. Take a moment, even if you think that you already know in your head, but take a moment to physically write what it is that you want out of this semester. What is it that you're trying to do? Okay. Because a lot of times, even with the best of intentions and this idea that we have everything so well organized in our head, we do not really know what it is that we're trying to do. And we sort of meander in a general direction, but I want you to get super specific. Okay. I want you to get super specific about saying, I have a recital in the spring. I want to have picked my repertoire by the end of October. I want to have started slow practice of that repertoire by December. Okay. And somewhere along the line, maybe you have to put in a deadline for when you need to get that recital scheduled. Okay. Because that's something that you could very easily put off. And then the next thing you know, you're getting a horrible date in the spring. Maybe you're getting a horrible venue at your school or anywhere else. And everything's already kind of got a tinge of not so great on it. Right. So somewhere in there, take care of the logistics too, but get super specific. Okay. I want to get organized so that I can record for the festival of my dreams in the spring, right? Whatever that may be, but just get specific. 1 or 2 things that you absolutely want to crush, right? I want to make sure that I have so and so taking care of my playing. and that also I want to make sure that I have this crazy project that I have due and the last week of school. I want to make sure that I'm ready with it 10 days early so that I'm comfortable and I can make adjustments. Just please do that for me. That's worked in my life. I was super specific about what I wanted when I decided to go back to graduate school. And it was a really meticulous timeline. It was a really long timeline. It started about a year out, and I got what I wanted. I ended up where I wanted to be with the teacher I wanted to be and the scholarship and all that kind of stuff. And that was one of the first big moments where I was incredibly clear about what I wanted. Okay, so do that for me. All right. Our last point before we get to just a little bit of some bonus motivation on your way out here. Think of this as this episode kind of feels like a pep talk. And if that's a huge like turn off to you, I'm sorry. That's one of the things that's especially when I'm talking to myself. This is how I talk to myself when I try and get motivated. Okay. So that's probably the voice that I'm using to come across. This one is the biggest, most obvious thing, but it's one that I promise you you're not doing a good enough job of, or I'm nearly promising you this. Sleep and hydration. Okay. Numerous studies measuring sleep and cognitive function have taken place. I thought about naming them all, but I'm out of school. That's too much work for me at this moment. It felt too much like school. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So do forgive me for that. It's a little bit perhaps hypocritical, but I know that when I was in my undergrad degree, I was sleeping about 4 hours a night. Okay. And I can remember specifically that at no other point in my developmental journey as a trombone player have I more often felt like absolute garbage playing the trombone as I did in my undergrad. Okay. I was practicing too much. I was prioritizing my practice poorly and I was not sleeping well. Okay. And part of that's because you're getting the college experience, you're doing all the things, you're hanging out with your friends, and I get that. Okay, I absolutely get that. But you have to sleep. Okay. There is an immense gap to be filled between the playing that you're capable of when you are sleeping very poorly for a very consistently long period of time, and the playing that you're going to be able to do when you can at least get 6.5 hours a night, okay, consistently, hopefully at a consistent period of time, or a regularly scheduled time. It's not you're not sleeping 6.5 hours at different times all over the place, but it's pretty consistent. I can think of when I was in my master's degree, there were two undergrads, and these two undergrads, I will not name them, but if they ever listen to this, they'll know exactly who they are. They were superstars. They were kicking our butts all over the place when I was at Alabama. And when they were in undergrad, they were the most adult, like scheduled sleepers I've ever seen in my life. At the time, I made fun of them, but in hindsight, they had it right while I was being a fool. Okay. They were getting the right amount of sleep, and they were also getting to the school at 6 a.m. every day to start their warm up, before class. All right. And they just so happened to be ITF winners and ATW winners, and they went off to their grad school of choice, and they have won jobs in orchestras. They've been finalists for jobs in orchestras, and they're working musicians to this day. Okay. And so that was in no small part due to the fact that they were as meticulous about the way they were taking care of themselves when they were in undergrad. Okay. So sleep, make time for it. You don't, those of you that are going to go off and cram practice, okay, for your lesson the day before, one, what are you doing? Don't do that. But two, you're not going to play better the next day because you crammed practice over the night, okay? And you might lie to yourself and tell yourself that you are, but I promise that if you had a much more thoroughly planned out week beforehand, you're going to be way better off for that. And the final part of this, which I don't feel like getting up and going to get, but need desperately right now as I round out this podcast, is hydration. Okay. You need to make sure that you are drinking water like crazy. And this was another thing that I have found, particularly for me when it comes to my playing endurance. When I'm in shape on the trombone, and can get a pretty good base level for how rest and hydration affect me, I can tell at such a high level when I am very dehydrated. And when I am very dehydrated, my endurance, my stamina for playing the trombone is horrible. Okay. But when I am drinking water meticulously, consistently, all of the words that I've used a lot already today, there's such a big difference in what I'm capable of doing. Okay. And there's also a big boost in cognitive function. That was something else that I was reading upon, Googling before I started this episode, just to reaffirm to myself because I've read it before, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy. When you are hydrated, your cognitive function is also much better. Your brain is 75% water. Okay. So obviously, if you're going to be drinking a lot of water, you're going to be taking care of yourself physically and mentally along the way. Trying to think, I lost something here for half a second, which isn't so bad because I've been talking for so darn long at this point. Oh, yes. The last thing I want to say, about sleep, kind of going back to that idea, if you're playing anything from memory, or more commonly for us trombone players, you're in school and you just have to be memorizing certain things about music history. Maybe you're practicing piano. Maybe you're memorizing anything for any of your classes. Sleep is what's going to file that stuff away properly. And from a performing of memorized music, which is something that I started in my doctorate, but I wish I would have started much sooner, is sleep is critical for your ability to play from memory. Okay. And people could push back on me on that a little bit, but I just know that in the reading that I have done, there's parts of your brain that are solidifying the stuff that you're working on from memory while you sleep. Okay, so just imagine when you're not sleeping, all that stuff you're trying to keep in your head, you're like a bucket with a bunch of holes in it, and everything's just kind of falling out. Okay, so those are some of the three things that you need to be considering, and it's really three and a half, right? Because we talked about planning out your academic hurdles to make sure that you know what's upon the horizon and you know how to go about it methodically, okay? So that nothing's catching you off guard and you are not procrastinating till the end. Embracing simplicity, making sure that you are focusing on your easy practice, right? And taking that very seriously, making sure that from a foundational level, you sound your absolute best and you're not just running yourself to the ground by practicing the hardest things that you have to practice every single day, okay? Because one, that is going to run you down physically. And two, you're going to get exceptionally discouraged because you're just going to practice sounding bad all the time. So make sure you're taking the time to play simply and to play beautifully. And then our second and a half point there was get really serious about what it is that you want this semester and write it down. Okay. Do it now. Do it as soon as you get done with this episode. Go write down your biggest goals for the semester and then let's make them happen. And then most obviously, sleep and hydration. Okay. If you have to schedule it, one of the things that I've seen with all facets of my life is if I schedule it like a practice session, when I have been in my most laser focused about trombone playing as being my thing and what it is that I'm trying to do, when I just make everything sort of around that. So if sleep is like, well, it's helping my playing, and hydration, well, it's helping my playing. That's when I'm most successful. I remember now one of the things I was going to say about water consumption. When I get up in the morning, I drink, I want to say it's 40 ounces of water, which is a little obscene, but I just do that first thing. Room temperature so that I can drink it quick. And then around midday, I drink another close to 40 ounces of water because I'm really bad about drinking water throughout the day. Okay. We all get busy. Our brains are all over the place. We're doing a bunch of things. It can be hard to stop and do that. But if you just make it blocks of time throughout the day where you drink water, I think that you'll find that you'll check that box and you will feel better for it. I promise you, promise you, promise you. Okay. So those are my three and a half things that can help us sort of recenter now that the rocket fuel of the beginning of the semester has worn off. Our motivation is a little bit thin, right? These are some things that can help us repropel ourselves. Is that a word? Repropel? Propel ourselves to a wonderful conclusion to this fall semester. And you can guarantee yourself that in March of 2025, you're going to be running into the same feelings and you can tighten up with these tactics also at that point, and you'll be better off for it. So, just quick bonus thoughts I wanted to write down here at the end. Go outside before the weather really starts to be awful. So for those of us up here in the Northeast, today, man, it's just been picturesque for the last couple of weeks. It's going to be great. But assuredly, as the clock turns back soon, it gets not so great. And it won't be as fun to be outside. So be outside while you can, get some of that vitamin D, soak up the sun responsibly. And for some of you, perhaps, a little bit further south, it's just been really hot. So maybe you can start going outside and enjoying that. Maybe you can enjoy some of the harder parts of the semester by going outside and kind of walking around. Okay. And want to say it was Peak Performance by Stuhlberg Magnus. I meant to quote that book earlier in this episode, but I'll quote it now. Taking a break, stepping outside, walking around, that's going to help with things. Okay. If you find yourself like you're running into a wall in the practice room, get out for a little bit. Just walk outside, reset, and get back to work. Okay. And then the last thing, because I have to tell myself this, and I've had to tell students this, and I know a lot of you listening take trombone, take music very seriously, and that's awesome. That's what we want because we want to perpetuate this art form. But just want you to realize your value goes beyond all of this. We're using the trombone to chase excellence in life, and that excellence looks a lot more than just playing the David or playing Tuba Mirum or playing Fountains of Rome or playing, Donna Lee. It looks like a million different things. Okay. And so your value is tied up in so many things, and you have a lot to bring to the table, I'm sure, whoever's listening to this. So keep going. I know it's cheesy, but I do believe in you. I think you're gonna, you listen to this, you're gonna be great. Okay. Just as so many people have told me, you're gonna be great. And I was always like, I don't know. Are you sure? Sometimes I still am, but just keep going. All right. Keep going. Keep doing this thing. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, we are really excited about some of the upcoming episodes we have. We're still excited to be bringing you very soon our first interviewed episode and so many other wonderful topics along the way. So have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and we look forward to talking to you soon.